The legendary April 25th Women's Football Club is in the 2026-2027 AFC Women's Champions League. But where did this club come from? Stay tuned to find out. My name is Jong, and this is DPRK Athletics. Before we get into the history of April 25th, there are 3 things to know. Firstly, in the DPRK, the majority of sport clubs are tied to a government ministry. In April 25th's case, they are tied to the Korean People's Army. Other famous examples include Kikwancha, which is attached to the Ministry of Transportation, and Pyongyang, which is attached to the Pyongyang City People's Committee. The next thing to know is that sport clubs in the DPRK usually field teams in multiple sports. The more successful a club is, the more sports that they will field athletes in. As the country's most successful club, April 25th fields teams in every major sporting discipline. But remember, having a team represent multiple sports is not unusual on this planet Earth, even in the West. Teams like FC Barcelona, Bayern München, and CSKA Moscow are great examples of this. Anyway, the last thing to know is that April 25th is the most prestigious team that represents the Korean People's Army. But don't get it wrong, there are multiple teams that represent the army. Nowadays, the club Sobeksu and the club Ryomyeong are also controlled by the army, and they compete against April 25th. Other military clubs exist as well. For example, Jebi represents the Air Force and Galmegi represents the Navy. Now, let's get into the origins of the April 25th team. However you look at it, April 25th has its origins in the Korean People's Army's football teams. Official propaganda states that Kim Il-sung's guerrilla force, the Korean People's Revolutionary Army, played football matches well before the establishment of the DPRK as a state. This is certainly believable. But we know for sure that after the establishment of the DPRK in 1948, the Korean People's Army would start fielding teams in domestic football tournaments. With the outbreak of the Korean War in July of 1950, football took a back seat. But as the war marched towards a stalemate in 1951, sport in the DPRK cautiously resumed. Resultingly, in December of 1951, Kim Il-sung officially established an overall athletics team for the Korean People's Army. From that point forward, the Korean People's Army football team would primarily participate in their own tournaments, and they would not play against other teams. But in 1958, things changed. From then on, the Korean People's Army team was to be known as the February 8th team, or Ipal in Korean. It was named after the official founding day of the Korean People's Army. From 1959, the February 8th team, unlike previous military teams, began to participate in domestic tournaments against top-flight competition. And they absolutely ran roughshod over everybody else. In other words, February 8th was utterly dominant. From 1955 to 1980, February 8th got first place in 16 domestic tournaments, at least doubling the mark of the next best team. February 8th also frequently went abroad and played foreign teams. The foreign teams included Hungary, Japan, China, the Soviet Union, Poland, Romania, Cuba, East Germany, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Mongolia. But around 1982, the February 8th men's football team simply vanishes from the record books. Because records remain very limited to outsiders, we simply don't know what happened to the February 8th football team. They were either disbanded, usurped by April 25th, or simply fell down in the standings. On the other hand, February 8th continues to field teams in other sporting disciplines up to the modern day, so it didn't go away entirely. Really, it's one of those mysteries of the DPRK that remains to be solved. So, where does April 25th fit in? We were talking about February 8th, right? Well, that's where things get a little bit tricky. Before we get into the multiple theories on the origins of the April 25th team, let's get into what we know for sure, or at least kind of know for sure. Kim Jong-il, the second leader of the DPRK, had a big interest in sport long before he officially became leader. According to state propaganda, Kim Jong-il was encouraging fellow students at Kim Il-sung University to play basketball in 1962, and by the mid-1960s, he was already taking a personal interest in leading the February 8th football team. Now, what do I mean by lead? Basically, he shows up to practices, he shows up to games, and he issues directives on how the team should play, as opposed to being a hands-on coach. Kim Jong-il wanted February 8th to be competitive on the international stage. But, at the same time, Kim Jong-il was mainly responsible for propaganda, and he didn't necessarily have direct control over sports teams or the sports sector. So, in 1970, Kim Jong-il was watching a couple of different amateur sports tournaments in the DPRK. After seeing these tournaments, Kim Jong-il focused on the development of athletes in the film sector, and he thought that that would yield excellent football players. So, Kim Jong-il established the Film Sector Football Club, and yes, it's literally called the Film Sector Football Club. He recruited a renowned coach from the countryside, and he put these film sector workers under a strict, military-style training regimen to make them into good football players. It would be one of Kim Jong-il's pet projects. In 1971, Kim Jong-il would attend matches that the Film Sector Football Club played against the DPRK's best football teams, and he offered personal guidance. By 1972, the Film Sector Football Club went to the Soviet Union, and they trained in winter and played friendlies against Soviet football clubs. But, in the end, the Film Sector Football Club's results weren't enough for Kim Jong-il. He felt that a military football team, armed with the partisan spirit of the Fatherland Liberation War, could achieve true competitiveness. So, in May 1972, Kim Jong-il disbanded the Film Sector Football Club. Subsequently, Kim Jong-il organized a new club of hand-picked players from the Korean People's Army. This led to the establishment of the April 25th Football Club on June 26, 1972. They were named after the founding day of Kim Il-sung's guerrilla army, otherwise known as the Korean People's Revolutionary Army. This is opposed to February 8th, which was named after the founding day of the Korean People's Army, which is the official state army and not Kim Il-sung's guerrilla army. Anyway, this is where the real controversy starts over April 25th's origin. Even DPRK state sources themselves can't accurately say where April 25th exactly came from. Let's examine each of these conflicting theories of the origin of April 25th, and you can decide for yourselves. The first theory comes from two DPRK history books. They claim that Kim Jong-il created April 25th from scratch using entirely new athletes. This theory seems to me to be the strongest, since both sources give a rough description of how the team was made. But this theory is still a bit flawed because it lacks corroborating sources from the time period, it omits a lot of details, and it boosts the personality cult of Kim Jong-il. The second theory comes from a pair of ROK athletic scholars in the 1990s, two men who I very much respect, Lee Hak-lee and Kim Dong-sun. They claim in their older book that the Central Athletics Training Institute was the source of the April 25th team. But the Central Athletics Training Institute vanishes from the record books roughly 10 years before the founding of April 25th. So it's hard to believe. The third theory comes from another athletics history book from the DPRK. This theory states that April 25th emerged from the Ministry of National Defense football team, back then known as the Minjok Boison. But by the time the April 25th team was founded, the Ministry of National Defense football team hadn't been in the record books for over 14 years. Moreover, there is a distinct possibility that the February 8th team was actually the successor team to the Ministry of National Defense football team, which would mean that April 25th could not also be the same successor team because February 8th took the players in the first place. Now, you might say, okay, well then maybe April 25th is the successor club to February 8th. Well, here's the problem. And this is the fourth theory, which I think is actively debunked. This comes from a DPRK news report, which is a little bit less authoritative than a history book, and it stated that April 25th emerged from the February 8th team. But this doesn't make any sense because February 8th and April 25th competed against each other in the same tournament. So obviously one couldn't have come from the other. So where did the April 25th team really come from? All we can say for certain is that they came from the Korean People's Army, and that it's very likely that they received a strong amount of attention from Kim Jong-il. Anyway, after the April 25th team was founded in 1972, it competed only internationally and did not participate in domestic competitions. April 25th's first match was in September of 1972 in Pyongyang against a club from Kazakh SSR named FC Kairat. With Kim Jong-il still taking significant interest in April 25th, April 25th would go on to play more international matches against teams from India, Singapore, Malaysia, Pakistan, Romania, Japan, the Soviet Union, Poland, and China throughout the early to mid 1970s. But in the late 1970s, records of April 25th's activities become more scarce. Eventually, in 1981, April 25th would finally enter domestic competition, and April 25th was dominant on the domestic side. From 1981 to 2015, April 25th, the men's team, would achieve first place in over half of the two most important tournaments each year. No other team came even close to this number. The men's April 25th team continues to be dominant even in the modern day. They've won 5 of the most recent 7 DPRK Premier League titles. The April 25th team also gets sent to foreign tournaments most often, as they played in a variety of tournaments sponsored by the Inter-Korean Sports Exchange Association in the 2000s and 2010s. And if you want to hear more about that, check the link in the description. But what about the women? Women's football was not established in the DPRK until 1985. And for more on the establishment of women's football, you can find another relevant video in the description. Anyway, the April 25th women's team was established under the existing structure of the men's team, and they continued the men's team's tradition of excellence. Taking all available records from 1988 to 2024, the April 25th women's team won the 2 most important tournaments of the year at over double the rate of the next most successful team. But their dominance has been challenged in recent years. With the emergence of the DPRK's lone business-sponsored club, Naekohyang, April 25th now faces very serious competition. In the past 2 years, the clubs have traded blows at the top of the DPRK Premier League leaderboard. But right now, Naekohyang's women's team stands above April 25th in terms of accomplishments. With their capture of the AFC Women's Champions League crown and advancement to the FIFA Women's Champions Cup, Naekohyang has achieved new heights. But April 25th hasn't backed down. April 25th won the domestic league this past year, and now they have their own chance at winning the AFC Women's Champions League this year. Will April 25th repeat the feat of their Naekohyang competitors? Or will Asia's other football titans be just too much? To find out, stay tuned to DPRK Athletics, where we will have full coverage of the April 25th team as they make a run at glory. Coverage starts on August 17th. Be there or be square. That's all for now.